Hello and welcome to Teenagers Untangled, the audio hug for parents going through the teenage years. I'm Rachel Richards, parenting coach, mother of 2 teenagers and 2 bonus daughters.
Hi there, I'm Susie Asley. I'm a mindfulness teacher, mindfulness coach and therapist and a musician and mother of 3 teenagers. 2 of them are twins.
Now, Susie, we're going to talk this time about gap years. Did you take a gap year?
I didn't, and I wish I had.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I did, but not for the reason most people take gap years.
Oh.
So we'll talk about that in a minute.
Intriguing.
Now, you've got a review there.
I have. It is lovely. It says, it's called So Helpful. I've just been listening to your drugs podcast. I've worked in that field, so feel quite confident to have these conversations, but it was so helpful to listen to your take on it. We came back from holiday to messages from my son's friends' parents that they had been smoking joints and doing edibles. Glad he's been away and isn't directly involved, but thought it was time to have these chats. I thought we'd have a few more years, but they were offered drugs. They're only 13, 14. Yikes, but clearly not. Wow.
That just makes us think, doesn't it? It's happening younger, and it's never too soon to have these conversations, just to forewarn them so that if they get given something, then they think, what did my mum say? Or what did my dad say about this?
Thank you for the review. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. The nuggets. Should we have a little talk about nuggets first?
Yes. So my nugget this week is probably a little bit more, I don't know, conceptual. But it's related to an event, which is that I've just dropped off my eldest at university.
Woohoo!
Yeah, which is a big deal. Just this 2 days ago.
It's a big deal, and we talked about it in the empty nest syndrome episode.
So
didn't we?
I am there.
Yes, right there. So how is there?
There is good. It's and he's not very far away actually. Just by how it has turned out, which feels different. I think that does make a big difference. He's only about an hour away, but won't be popping back all the time. So he's there. We had a lovely build up, and it was all very lovely. And the dropping off was lovely as well, because he came back actually at the weekend, and I dropped him off again. So I'd seen it. But the nugget is this whole idea that I've been practicing very much, and this idea of impermanence. Of it's very mindfulness based. Of everything changes, nothing stays the same. And the more we cling and the more we push away, the harder things are. So this idea of this is a new phase. I still have 2 children at home. So I'm not complete empty nest, but it does really sow seeds. And it's a big deal. This idea of, he's been at home for 18 years and now he's not. And I don't know what it will look like when he's finished. Of course, he'll come back in holidays, but nothing stays the same. Everything changes, and it's meant to change. He's meant to be going off, and that just is a really positive thing. And there's a grief in it for me. I'm mourning that. So it's quite a layered thing, but nothing stays the same. And the more I can embrace that, the more organic it feels.
What a great perspective, and what an important thing to think about, because I think we all would like, when things are good, we want it to stay there.
Exactly.
But, the Buddhists talk about the wheel of life and how, it's never going to stay.
No, it's not meant to.
And it will change.
Yeah.
And, but it's hard.
It's hard. Yes, there's a grief in it. There's a hard, but we can practice it. The letting go is really important.
Yes. And if you listen to our last episode, you'll have heard me dedicate it to my lovely friend, Sophie. And I was talking with her last week about some of the messages she's been getting for her book of memories. And one of them, so this is memories that her friends have of her, little special, I don't know, little photos, anything where they go, I remember you doing this. And it brings the person to life, to full life. Because when we're mums, quite often they only see that little segment of your life, but your life is so much bigger. And we're getting some fantastic stories in. The mother had written that she'd never forgotten Sophie's kindness when she had felt isolated by a clique at school and ended up sitting alone at a sports fixture. Sophie had deliberately gone to sit with her and chat, despite the fact that she knew all the other people and could easily have joined them. Now, what's interesting about it is that Sophie had completely forgotten doing this. And I wanted to mention it because it reminded me that sometimes for us, these little gestures don't really take anything out of our time or our day, or they're just kind of meaningless in a way. But for somebody else, when we reach out and we do something like that, it can have a lifelong impact. And I thought, what a wonderful thing to dwell on.
That's really beautiful. So I call it the ripple effect.
Yes.
It's really, really powerful.
Yes, absolutely. So when we say gap year, it kind of implies a void. I was thinking about that gap. Yeah, gap.
Yeah.
It's
a weird name, isn't it?
It's weird, isn't it? Because it's like it's as if nothing's happening. But in actual fact, it could be nothing happening, or it could be monumental things happening.
Yeah.
So I think it should be called a personal development year. Ooh. Anyway, restoration year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they might not do it then.
No. So you didn't do a gap year?
No, but the main reason, it was never really a thing that I thought about doing, because I'm a musician and I was going to music college and I'd got my place at music college. I think some people did take a gap year, I learnt later, but it was really unusual because for me, doing a gap year would have meant traveling. I would have wanted to travel, and I needed to be practicing my instrument.
Yeah, it's kind of hard with an instrument, isn't it?
You can't just take, weeks off. So for me, that wasn't a thing. But I think the learning in the gap year is really good. I tried to nudge my eldest to take a gap year, but he didn't want to, which is also fine.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, because one of the downsides that I did read about is that if you're trying to do kind of some of the hard sciences like physics, maths, there has been a warning that you could go off the boil, that you'll lose some of that knowledge and momentum, and it can be much harder to go in and do the course. But, that's just one of the things I read. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. So I took a gap year, and I'm older than you, but it just wasn't really a thing. Okay. When I was young, partly because I was at a local college where it just seemed like an extreme indulgence, and nobody I knew really was doing that. What happened for me was I got way better results than I had expected, or anyone had expected, and it then made me think, well, maybe I'll just apply to a better university. Okay. Which then prompted taking a year out. Now, I wasn't even living at home at that point, so there was nobody I had to negotiate with to do this. I was already earning money, albeit not particularly great money, but I was temping. So at that time you could go into temp agencies. And I looked at what the options were, and I'd seen a picture in a magazine of Nepal, and I thought, I want to go there. Didn't know where it was. Thought, that looks fun. That'll be easy. And a friend of mine found out I was going, and she had taken a year off. I don't know why, but she was going to Oxford, and said, should we go together? And I thought, yeah. So I was then left with a gap because she had to earn some money. Yeah. And I was living away from home. So I was spending money as well as trying to save it. Yes. And I thought I was going to have to wait until January when she would be ready. Right. So I thought, well, I might just do something in the meantime. And I found out in Israel you could get paid. Oh, yeah. Didn't know where Israel was, didn't know that they were any of the history of it, which is extraordinary. I think I was just incredibly ignorant, which made me very
and ballsy.
And I found out about something called Bet-Sefer Sodeh, which are these field schools for the protection of nature all over Israel. Turned up in Israel because they said, we can't book you ahead of time. Okay. And walked into the office and said, right, I'd really like to go to the Red Sea. I've seen you've got one there. I picture myself in a bikini at the Red Sea, living at large. And they said, we've only got one slot. And I said, oh, so not the Red Sea? They went, no, not the Red Sea. And I said, well, where is it? And they said, it's in the Golan Heights. And they got out a map, and I went, wait a second. Even in my ignorance, I knew there was a war, Lebanon-Syria problem. Yeah. And it was right up by the UN buffer zone. Uh-huh. And I just thought, I don't know, but I had no choice. So I said, yeah, all right. So off I went on this bus, turned up in the middle of the night, and that was a baptism of fire. And we were in an encampment with rolled barbed wire around it, a man in a gun turret. And all the area around it, you just couldn't walk wherever you wanted because there were landmines. So they were clearly marked out. Yeah.
Crikey.
It was.
It's not really backpacking around Bali, is it?
No, it's not backpacking. No, but I loved it. I thought it was amazing. Oh, wow. And I was only met Israelis. I learnt so much. Yeah. And then I moved to Jerusalem and I met Palestinians. Yes. And I can't stress enough how life-changing this event was. Yeah. And I went in that year. That was I went around India and Nepal as well, and they were all amazing. But actually, this particular experience on my own in these environments and I was reading, I went from Thomas Hardy and Shakespeare to reading about American literature and Russian literature and all these things. Completely changed my life.
Yeah,
changed
amazing.
the course. I got to university, switched from English to doing politics and international relations.
Wow.
It really, really had a massive impact on me. So my point is, it can be really life-changing in a very interesting way.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I think it...
And I'm glad.
Yeah.
Very glad I did that. So...
That just emphasises that what I already believed, that it can be life-changing.
Yes, and but as a parent, if your kid came to you and said, so I'm planning...
Yeah, no, I tried to nudge mine to do it. And he was like, no, I don't want to.
But the thing is, we imagine them wandering around Bali, which looks lovely, but you don't imagine them being in a sort of effectively by UN buffer zone.
No.
So there are...
No.
Yeah,
but I just think
really
the whole
interesting.
idea of travelling wherever you go, the life experience that you need to do that is really, really can be really valuable.
You're drawing on so many
to.
skills, having to make lots of decisions. It's a really extraordinary thing.
Yeah.
So when do we do it?
Everyone,
When do we do it? Before uni? That gives you time to pause, regroup, getting some more maturity, all these things. And there are lots of schools now that accept students deferring admission for a year. They might request a proposal for how you plan to spend your gap year, so be prepared for that. There's during uni. Now, this is one that I think is a bit more controversial. And I say that just because it got to the end of my second year and I sat with my tutor and said, I think I'm going to take a year out because I was terrified. And he just looked at me and he said, that is not a good idea because we find people do far better if they stay with their cohort.
Socially, yes.
Yes.
Of course.
And he was right.
Yeah.
I was just scared.
Yeah.
But it can offer relief from academic burnout.
Yeah.
So when kids are at university, if things aren't going well, it can be really helpful. Student loans could end up being an issue, though. It's really important to understand that.
There are lots of courses that do sort of placement, so that's a way of kind of bridging that gap, isn't it? You do that somewhere abroad.
Yeah, absolutely. And after university, a sabbatical can also help people who, before you go into work, or working professionals. Now, my bonus daughter, who's, in her 20s, is planning a gap year. Now, she had one, but she didn't really do much with it before university. So now she's making money, she's proved herself in the workplace, and she's got an idea for a business that she wants to try out, which also involves travelling, so scratching an itch. So she's now planning it.
I think it's a brilliant idea.
In her mid-20s. So the point is, life has changed. People are no longer rigidly held into one career and this is what you've got to do for the rest of your life.
And I think the resistance for gap years is often, not always, but often like a fear, isn't it? A fear of this kind of idea that you're going to run out of time, you've got to do everything now. And this whole concept that you'll be left behind, sort of FOMO in the workplace. And I think that's rubbish. There's so much time in your 20s. You've got so much time. It's really like the experiences you had. I know they were earlier, but the learning you get from doing different things, you're never going to not use.
And if you think about the way that people talk about, again, this is quite Buddhist, but it's not the getting there, because when you get somewhere, then you're looking for the next peak.
Exactly. It's
actually the journey.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the way you grow and what you experience in life.
And that's a way of looking at your whole life, really, if you're going to go down that route. It's like we're always trying to get to the next bit, but well, how about the bit on the way?
Just enjoying the bit you're doing right now.
And there is a bit of kind of looking. I remember when I was, you mentioned it with your gap year, when I was sort of that age, people looked down upon gap years. It was a bit of a, beach bum. You're not going to do anything, but you can do so many valuable things. You can volunteer, you can do some really life-changing, really worthwhile things. It doesn't, it can look very different. So it's not to be looked down upon.
No, I agree. And the benefits of a gap year are things like personal growth. And many gap year participants return to their studies or jobs feeling a lot more inspired, engaged and focused. This can really help with that new perspective. So you expose yourself to a world that and makes you it completely opened up my life and my world and my perspectives. And having international immersion. I mean, if you are trying to learn a language, the best thing to do is be in that country.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah.
More interesting stories for employers.
Yes.
Okay. So when you're trying to apply for a job, you can say, I got this from it's actually a narrative. It's like, what is the story of my life? Who am I? And how do I pull that all together? It's not important. You don't have to follow one person's path or another's. No. It's what are you saying about why you're doing the things you're doing?
confidence you get from just traveling, or if that's what you choose to do, or working, or whatever it is, it's really valuable.
And a gap year can also improve academic performance by giving you more of a sense of purpose. Like, now I know what I'm trying to aim for. Because a lot of kids, they'll go through, you sort of follow the academic path, but there's a niggling feeling like, what is this all for?
Yes. And am I doing the right thing? Do I really want to be doing this? Am I just doing it because my mates are?
Yeah, exactly. There are drawbacks to a gap year. So, you mentioned it, this kind of feeling of falling behind. The expense, we can't go without mentioning that. The truth is, though, I had no money coming from anybody but myself. You can find jobs to save money. It was grueling when I got back, paying off credit card bills that I'd built up, but I did it.
And most people, they work and then they spend what they've earned, don't they?
Exactly.
So it's doable.
You can do working holidays as well.
Yes.
There are other options. Actually, I'll just mention right now this young man who decided to go and work in Japan as a teacher, as a gap, because he could make some money and didn't really know Japan that well. And he's ended up with his own YouTube channel. He's still there 10 years later, and he's making a massive success of it. It's called Abroad in Japan. And he writes for the Sunday Times. He's this, YouTuber who's making a lot of money. And all he did was, while he was out there, he started sort of creating videos about Japanese culture. Hey, look, they do this. And the Japanese started liking it as well. And
I love it.
So this is the thing. You evolve, and then who knows?
Who knows? That's really funny, because my eldest, who had a bit of a funny old A-level path, he's gone to university, which is amazing because that's what he wanted to do. But we didn't know if that was how it was going to end. And he's really keen on Japan, and we went there very briefly. And I was saying, why don't you go to Japan? If it hadn't worked out, maybe he would have been doing that and been teaching or doing something like that, which would have been amazing.
Other research has shown that 90% of gap year participants surveyed return to their studies within a year. But that means 10% don't. Yeah. Is that a downside, though?
Not necessarily.
Maybe they decided that wasn't for them. Maybe they're in Japan making a lot of money out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you've already mentioned it. The knowledge loss can be an issue. It depends on what you're trying to study. Yeah. But losing that momentum, so for example, one of my daughters is learning Greek and Latin, and these are really intensive, vocab heavy subjects. And coming away from that could mean that she would lose a lot of the momentum she's built. Who knows?
However, I do think if you really want to do something, if you're really excited about learning something in particular, you will pick it back up again.
Exactly. And the truth is, I came back from my gap year absolutely thrilled to be at university. I was so excited because I thought, I'm going to meet all these really intellectual people. Yeah. And I didn't. It was not what I expected to be sitting around pontificating about really important things, and everyone was in the bar getting pissed.
Because they hadn't had a gap year.
Exactly, and I'm too
pompous. You've done it already, yeah.
And there's also stress. Kids can have homesickness. There's a culture shock. There are other things where they may think that this is what they want. I know of someone whose daughter called up crying, saying she was not ready for the major change in. She was used to staying in nice hotels, and then you're staying in. I was fine with that. I was fine with staying in horrible little places.
But that's not a reason not to do something, is it? That's just life flexibility, isn't it?
It's just knowing.
I thought I wanted to do that, and I don't, so I'm changing my mind.
Exactly. Yeah. What I thought was interesting is I saw Teaching Abroad, some stats they put in, said that an estimated 83% of gap year takers actually worked in Britain, and 16% worked or volunteered abroad. And 1 in 5 young people rely on the bank of mum and dad to fund their gap year.
Wow.
Not my kids.
No.
I've told them already, guys, you want to take a gap year, you can fund it yourselves.
That's surprising. It's so high.
I was surprised by
that.
They
go and get a job and then they travel if that's what they want to do. Or they, Yeah, it's interesting.
Anyway, the most important thing, I think, is choosing a goal. So if you're going to do a gap year, why? And I guess the question is, if you don't know why you want to do a gap year, then maybe that's, just continue with education if you're not burnt out. I think this sheer volume of options can be overwhelming. So this is part of the problem of deciding about what you're going to do with a gap year. And I think the sooner people start thinking about this, the better it is. So my kids have been talking about gap years now for a long time. And I've always said, well, don't take one unless you know what you want to do with it. So how do you structure a gap year? Do research and planning early. Pinterest board. Get, like, what do you feel or think about this? What are your dreams? And it can be anything from doing a job where you think, I really want to do that job. Actually, do I know what that job entails? And going in and doing some workplace experience, going and working for a charity so you learn a bit of gratitude, all those things, right? So your goals could be either personal development or they could be linked to a country or an activity. So it's worth checking whether there are entry requirements for some of those countries you might want to go and live or work in, what seasonal weather conditions there are, because these things ahead of time will help you. Because if you haven't thought about this stuff, you might think, I'm going to go such and such a place. And then you find out that's monsoon season. So this is why it's useful to kind of think about this stuff ahead of time and plan your itinerary with a degree of flexibility, which I did. We kind of had an idea of what we were going to do, and then we just met other people and moved around to different places, like what's interesting, and other people told us. Decide who you're going to travel with, if you're going to travel. Is it because this actually does make a difference. It can stop you from feeling lonely. You can share the cost of things. You can be safer. But at the same time, if you go alone, you're not being held back by other people, their different budgets, their expectations. And also what I found was when I was with my friend, I was much less inclined to reach out to the locals.
Yeah, and to meet
We relied
people
on each other.
Yeah.
So that's the downside. And I really felt that made a difference because when I was on my own, I really had to just go to dinner parties with people that were locals.
It's very different.
Yeah. You're much more exposed. It's a much more extreme experience.
Yeah.
It may be better or worse. I don't know.
Depends on who you are as an individual. I'm just sitting here thinking, I lived in Denmark for years and they tend to, massive generalisation, and I haven't lived there for years, but I think it's still the same. People generally go to university later. They finish school a tiny bit later. They start later and they finish a bit later. And they go to university a bit later. And having a gap year or gap years is completely normal. And it's much more sort of seen as a sort of not a rite of passage, because not everybody does it, but it's really kind of cherished, and it's a kind of growing up thing. You do things and you grow up with it, and then when you study, if you decide to do that way, you're kind of more ready for it. And I'm just kind of reflecting as you're talking, like you have a year, make the best of it, whereas there it's like, you've got a year, you might want to take two, what do you want to do?
Interesting.
There's a lot more fluidity around it. And then maybe they start their careers a lot later, but there's loads of time, guys.
Yes. It's just like, how are you going to live in the meantime, I guess?
Yeah, but they work, they earn their own money. They're not,
I love that.
Yeah.
And my friend who I travelled with had actually spent a year working in a filling station before she did her A-levels, and then thought, actually, I don't like that. I think I need to study, and ended up at Oxford.
What a great lesson.
Right?
We have this fear that you were going to run out of time, and I don't think we are.
No.
Bags of it.
Yes. And so it's sort of stepping outside, but you're not going to get lost. The problem is some people do. The worry is if you don't have goals, you don't have momentum. So sometimes it can just feel like falling off a cliff a bit. If your friends have gone off to college, or they're planning, they're having a holiday during the summer, and then they're going to do something, and you haven't got anything planned. And I talked about this on Instagram, actually, this young man who was just playing on his Xbox all the time. Yeah. And I said, well, it sounds like he's diverting his feelings because, where are his friends?
Yeah. Or that it feels like a huge effort to actually apply to the course that you actually really want to do, because now you've been traveling or working for a while. It's, I can't really be bothered. And then maybe you regret that later. But, there's also flexibility. So we can, as parents, we can just talk this through and just say, just check in with them and make sure that they're not just suddenly dropping off a cliff. Yeah.
Right? Because I think the momentum sometimes isn't there.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. It's both.
Yeah. You can work abroad, teaching English, as I mentioned, working as an au pair, live-in nanny. Hospitality industry needs a lot of people. They're learning languages. There's focusing on sports. So if you're really good at sports, there are lots of kids who this is their dream, and there's nothing wrong with them spending a bit of time going out or acting, exploring that. and then saying, okay, I'm just parking my education, finish one bit of your education, park it, and then know that it's still there.
Yeah.
You haven't lost it completely if you don't go down that route. I think you're so right. We end up thinking, if I don't continue down this route, I will be lost.
Yeah.
It's not true.
End of my life. Oh. Yeah. Or the parents are thinking that maybe.
Yes. And, we can explore a future career path, internships, resting and recharging. 35% of respondents to the Gap Year Association survey cited burnout as a prime motivator for choosing to take time off.
Yeah.
Planning for your return. That's the other thing. Like you need a flight home, for example.
Good point.
And you need to be able to update your CV so if you're doing a gap year, so what have I learned from this? And it doesn't need to be the old boring stuff that people put on their CVs. It can be something. Personal development is just as important to employees.
Now,
exactly.
I think it's so competitive.
So you can put it on your CV and it makes it interesting, but keep notes of things. And have something lined up for when you get home, because you can end up with a bit of a crash. You've been traveling, it's been amazing, and then you get back to England and it's grey, or you're wherever else you live, and none of your friends are around, and it can feel very isolating and hard. So that's one of the things to sort of think about.
And again, that's part of the experience, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. This woman I read about, Rhiannon Dwyer, said she wasted a lot of time just going with the flow in her year off. And she, looking back, wishes she had pushed herself a little harder. Right. Yeah. She says she's happy that she took the time off, but she really thinks she could have done a lot more with it. Yeah.
And maybe at 18, some of them aren't. Maybe I wouldn't have been as well, like mature enough to make the best of the time. Yeah. And maybe after, if university is your bag, maybe after is a better time. There are lots of times. Or I have a friend actually who did we wouldn't call it a gap year. I think she's probably too old to call it a gap year. That took a year sabbatical from the job and travelled on her own around the world.
Which is brilliant. And we mentioned before the lady I saw on Twitter whose child had gone to university and she went interrailing.
Amazing.
Because she'd never done it. How cool is that? Yeah. So the other thing to do is just double check. If you're going to university, you planned university, just check in with them before you do any of this. Like, what is their attitude towards this? Because some of them actually like this. Some of them, particularly, like I said, medicine, physics, maths, some of these courses, the tutors worry you'll go off the boil. You'll come back to college and you will be struggling to get back into that. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it means engage with them beforehand and think, okay, how am I going to manage this? Yeah, and how am I going to manage this? Yeah. If that's because you can do stuff. Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't do some prep work beforehand.
And also, once you've got your deferred place offer, if you get one, then as long as you get the grades, then it's fine.
It's in the bag. So you've got something to come back to and you don't need to worry. Yeah. And you might be asked to prove how you continue to develop your skills and subject knowledge during your year out. So it's just checking. So thinking ahead to, okay, here's where I'm thinking of going. Here's the courses I'm thinking of doing. Why don't I just look at the institutions and think, because the other great thing that I haven't mentioned is if it's a highly competitive course, bear in mind that you will now have your grades. Mm-hmm. So you are in a better position possibly than someone who hasn't got their grades, and you're more mature. Yeah. And you're able to say, you don't have to bet on me. You know what I'm giving.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in my situation, I got better grades. Yeah. Or you could take some time, do, a 6 months, improve my A-level grades to get into a better course if that's what I wanted to do. There were all sorts of options and include some travel with that.
Yeah, I think socially as well, you often hear of the people who've taken a gap year, they hang out together because they're probably a bit more mature.
That's 100% true.
It's inevitable, isn't it? You go off and do something for a year, you're going to be more mature, not just because you're a year older, but because of what you've experienced. So yeah, it's different. It's loads of advantages. Yeah. But it's not for everybody. Not everyone wants to do that.
No. But there's never too late.
It's never, ever too late. Yes. My friend will vouch for that.
So, Susie, are you ready for your gap year?
Do you know what? When all my kids have left home, me and my partner are going to do some fun things. Yes. So maybe we will do that.
Yes. So she will be doing this podcast from somewhere exotic.
Absolutely, yeah. Back of a van somewhere. You think
Brilliant. I love it. Yeah, I know you're not. I know you're not. Now, if you found this program useful, please follow us so you don't miss an episode. Tell your friends, and you could even leave a review. I've put a bit more information on the blog to complement this podcast, and you can find it at www.teenagersuntangled.com, where you can message us. Search all of our past episodes for any particular subject that interests you. And we're always interested in your questions. So do keep them coming. I even had one coming in from LinkedIn the other day, which was
cool.
a new one.
Yeah.
Love it. Susie can be contacted on
www.amindful-life.co.uk.
Ask her any question.
Any question.
And she can help you with calming your nervous system. She can deal with specifics, or she can deal with just general.
Yeah, parenting things,
Yes.
or just general, regulation, mindfulness things, therapy, whatever.
Yeah.
And you can book a free chat on my website if you so wish.
Imagine that. That's it for now, my fellow untanglers. And don't forget, you're a great parent doing your best with what you've got.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.